I'm really pleased to welcome everyone to this webinar about women's research. With headlines about how USAID freezes are catastrophic for women and girls, and the National Institute for Health in the US potentially cancelling grants for projects studying gender identity and diversity and equity inclusion in the scientific workforce, it is clear that a focus on women's research and gender studies and diversity in research is more vital than ever. Despite valiant efforts from advocacy groups, research shows that as recently as 2020, only 5% of global research and development funding was allocated to women's health research, and that health funding in particular is still not aligned with the burden of disease. Closing this gap could unlock 400 billion in global GDP and hugely impact global policy. So it's beneficial for everyone that we can support women's research in whatever way we can. So, in honour of International Women's Day and Women's History Month, we are excited to warmly welcome you all to this webinar. I'm honoured today to welcome our panellists. We have Bushra Mahdi, who is the managing editor overseeing 3 Gold Open Access journals, Women's Health, Therapeutic Advances in Hematology, and Therapeutic Advances in Vaccines and Immunotherapy. With a background in medical communications, she has collaborated with leading industry organizations such as the European Hematology Association and Gilead. She holds an MSc in clinical oncology and a BSc in biomedicine. Passionate about health equity, she is particularly interested in addressing health disparities, improving healthcare access, and supporting global contributions to clinical advancements. Shasha Sharif is a managing editor on the Therapeutic Advances team at Sage, managing a portfolio of 3 Gold Open Access journals: Women's Health, Therapeutic Advances in Drug Safety, and Therapeutic Advances in Psychopharmacology. Shasha has worked in the publishing industry for over 6 years and has an academic background in psychology. She has a keen interest in accessibility and oversees the publication of plain language summaries of publications at the Therapeutic Advances journals. Mary Beck Griffin is an assistant professor at Rutgers University. Her research interests include LGBTQ plus health, condom and sex messages in rap and pop music, menstrual health stigma and education, and access to sexual healthcare services. She's also half of Dr. Period Hackers, a Twitter menstrual education account, and is working on a research project called Bloody Women, Slasher Films and the Female Viewer. Mary Beck is also a trained full spectrum doula and a certified sexologist. She's passionate about helping people connect to their bodies and centering sexuality as an innately human experience. She also provides counselling around contraception and menstruation. Laura Hood is a senior politics editor and the assistant editor at the Conversation UK and a part of the Conversation Europe team. Prior to joining the Conversation, Laura worked for more than 5 years as a reporter and news editor for Research Fortnight, a specialist publication focusing on science and higher education funding and policy. She also worked as a reporter for Research Europe, covering European research policy. Finally, my name is Georgina Savage. I'm a marketing executive working with the author team here at Sage. I'm also the manager of the Sage Perspectives blog. When we share the slides in our follow-up, please do refer to these links on this page to find out more about our panelists and explore their incredible work. Just as a reminder to get everyone started, send us any questions that come up during the presentation in the Q&A box. We'll be answering them at the end of the session, but please do put in questions as and when they come up. This chart illustrates a timeline of the typical author journey, moving from early stages of securing funding and conducting research all the way through to peer review and publication. This webinar will be focused more broadly across the whole researcher experience, but I encourage you to go back and watch other webinar recordings in this series, which have broken down other areas in the publishing cycle, as well as register for our upcoming webinars. Now that we're done with the housekeeping, I'll hand over to our brilliant panelists. Bushra is here to get us started.
Thanks, Georgina. So I wanted to start us off with some background on why research by and about women matters, showing some statistics, and then we'll go over the challenges women face in research and publishing. So firstly, women are often underrepresented in STEM-related fields. For example, according to a UNESCO report in 2023, 35% of all students in STEM are women. In this figure on the left, which is based on data from the National Science Foundation, women make up 29% of STEM labor force, 19% of STEM company board members, and only 3% of STEM industry CEOs are women. From the research side, women have been represented in clinical trials from about 40 to 72%, however, with women of color often significantly underrepresented. From a publishing perspective, different studies have shown that women-authored papers receive significantly less citations than male-authored papers and often make up a much lower percentage of editorial boards, much less hold editor-in-chief positions. So before moving on to why women face some of these challenges in the workplace, I just want to go over some background statistics on health disparities found in research on women's health to get a full picture. So this is a study published in Nature in 2021, and it looked at more than 20,000 clinical trials in the United States between 2000 and 2020. It found that women were underrepresented in some trial types and overrepresented in others. The study compared participation rates with the burden of disease measured in disability-adjusted life years, which account for the disability and death caused by a disease. So, for example, women comprised 40% of participants in oncology clinical trials between 2000 and 2020, but experienced roughly 46% of the burden. In neurology and immunology, women were also underrepresented. Other examples of health disparities where women are underrepresented include cardiovascular disease, where women are more likely to be misdiagnosed after a heart attack, and only 34% of participants in cardiovascular clinical trials are women. In mental health, depression is twice as common, and yet studies don't adequately have a gender lens to them. In gender-based violence and economic inequality, 1 in 3 women globally experience gender-based violence, and yet only 1% of global research funding goes to this issue, according to a UN report. So with this in mind, I want to hand it over to Maribek, who will give us an overview of the challenges women face in the research industry.
Thank you. So I'm here to talk a little bit about some of the challenges and advocacy that women and their supporters can do to help move forward through the publishing process. Next slide, please. Thank you. So some of the challenges that women researchers face are barriers to publication and advancement. We know that there are funding disparities, both in the study of women's health issues and also funding for women. A lot of that has to do with name recognition and the ability to apply for funding, especially if you are a woman who is then studying women's health issues. So we're just not seeing as much funding happening in both kind of avenues. Women are underrepresented in senior academic and in research positions. We also know that in an academic setting, a lot of the service and mentorship roles tend to fall to women, which then further takes away more time from the research and the publication process in the process of mentoring students, which is also incredibly important. But again, there's just a double or triple burden then of academic work that's being given to femme-identified academics. So then also thinking about the access to opportunities, there's a lack of mentorship and insufficient support for women in STEM. There have been studies done that show that young children, as young as 6, learn by that point, female children, that they are maybe not qualified or they expect themselves not to do as well in STEM-related fields, which then sets forth a lifelong disparity in the belief that you have a space and a role within STEM-related fields. And then when we're talking about the grant application, there's bias there. Studies show that there's a 9% lower award acceptance rate after reapplication for people who are seeking grant funding. So there are many ways that you can advocate for yourself. I always say that being the squeaky wheel means that if you squeak enough, that attention will be given to this. So you should ask your university if they have any grant or research funding to help you pay for academic processing charge fees. You can also ask, I know one of the universities I'm with, Rutgers University, they have an agreement to cover all of these APC fees for certain families of journals. So there may be then reductions that your universities can provide or that the journals themselves can provide, either based on your gender or based on your role as maybe an early career researcher. Again, thinking about where you can then publish if your university has negotiated fee waivers directly with the publisher, and then getting involved with academic journals as a guest editor or part of board membership, oftentimes those positions come with a certain number of APC waivers and things like that. Or if you're the guest editor for that collection, it again helps you get your name out there, your research out there, connecting and networking with other researchers, and also then writing the call for submissions and things like that. So it's another way to get your research out there. And then talking about strengthening your research, I think this is somebody else. I believe this is Laura.
Hi, Mary Beck. That's
Oh, sorry.
No,
Sorry.
no problem. Hi, everyone. I'm going to now talk you through some of the more practical things when it comes to preparing your research for publication. So let's start off with strengthening your research. So as journal managers, we see a very wide range of manuscript submissions. A strong submission isn't just about good research, it's also about clarity, structure, and adherence to our journal guidelines. Ensuring that all key elements are in place not only improves the chances of acceptance, but also helps us to streamline the review process, which makes it easier for us editors and reviewers to assess the manuscript's quality. Here are some of the most important aspects authors should focus on when preparing your submission. Firstly, following publisher guidelines for each manuscript type. Each journal has specific requirements for different manuscript types, whether it's an original research article, a review, or a case report, etc. Authors should very carefully check our guidelines to ensure the submission meets the formatting, word count, and structural requirements. Equator guidelines and checklist. For research articles here at Sage, we follow the Equator Network guidelines, and we think these are essential to all research. These guidelines help authors to standardize their reporting, which improves transparency and reproducibility. Authors should use the relevant checklists such as Consort for clinical trials or Prisma for systematic reviews, and ensure they submit it with their manuscript. Clear, replicable methodology. Closely aligned with Equator guidelines, a well-documented methodology allows other researchers to reproduce the study. Authors should provide sufficient detail on their study design, participant selection, interventions, and statistical analyses. Ensuring inclusive language. Language matters, and authors should use inclusive and respectful terminology throughout their manuscript. This includes avoiding biased language related to gender, race, disability, or mental health conditions, and following best practices for patient-centered reporting. Informative manuscript title. I know it's very simple, but a clear and informative title helps readers, editors, and peer reviewers to understand the manuscript's focus. It should be precise, avoid unnecessary jargon, and reflect the study's key findings or purpose. Ethical approval and informed consent statements. For studies involving human participants, it is really important that you include ethical approval details and informed consent statements. Missing ethical declarations can delay the review process or even lead to desk rejection in some cases. And finally, a cover letter. This is more than a formality. It should concisely explain the study's significance, why it fits the journal scope, and confirm that the submission adheres to ethical standards. A well-written cover letter can help editors to quickly assess the manuscript's relevance, and we find them very important when we first look at manuscripts that come into the submission system. So by focusing on these elements, authors can improve their chances of a smooth peer review process and a successful publication. So now for common mistakes to avoid. We often see the same avoidable mistakes which delay the peer review process or lead to desk rejections. Just being aware of these common pitfalls can help the submission process become much smoother. Not thoroughly reviewing submission guidelines. Every journal has its own set of requirements. Taking the time to just check these details up front can save a lot of back and forth. Incorrect formatting of tables and figures. Tables and figures should be clear, properly labeled and in the right format. Common issues can include blurry images, missing captions, or using the wrong file types. Just a quick look over before submission can make a big difference. Not the appropriate fit for the journal or if it's out of scope. A well-written paper is still unlikely to be accepted if it doesn't align with the journal scope. Before submitting, it's always a good idea to review the journal's aims and relevant articles to ensure a good match. Wrong manuscript type. Choosing the wrong manuscript category, such as submitting a case report as an original research article, can lead to delays. Checking the journal's descriptions for each manuscript type helps to avoid this issue. Poor grammar and syntax. Clarity is really important. If a manuscript is difficult to read due to grammar or sentence structure issues, it does make the peer review process harder for us. We always recommend proofreading very carefully before submitting or using a language editing service if needed. Citing or including work from other sources that are not sufficiently referenced. Proper citation is essential to avoid plagiarism concerns. Every submission that comes into our system does go through a plagiarism checking program. So it is really important that authors cite work properly. You should ensure that all sources are correctly referenced and use citation management tools to maintain accuracy if possible. Not abiding by the journal's preprint policy. Many journals have specific policies regarding preprints. Before submissions, authors should check whether preprint posting is permitted and ensure proper disclosure in the manuscript. And finally, if you are unsure of anything, please just ask us. We are here to help. If anything is unclear, whether it's about formatting, policies, manuscript types, you name it, it is always best to reach out to the managing editor. A quick question can save a lot of time for you down the line. By keeping these points in mind, you can make the submission process a lot smoother and improve your chances of success. Dr. Jeanette Wade is one of the 3 editors-in-chiefs of Women's Health, and she has shared her wish list of key qualities that she looks for in a strong submission. As an editor-in-chief, Jeanette reviews a high volume of manuscripts and makes final decisions on acceptance or rejection on papers. These factors often determine whether a paper moves forward in the publication process or not. What excites her are timely topics that advance or improve the experiences of women in society, strong methodologies that provide both generalizable data and necessary context, and literature reviews that meaningfully engage with women's lived experiences. She values interdisciplinary collaborative projects and research that offers clear implications for practice, policy, and future studies. Specifically for those of you looking to publish in women's health, it is important to demonstrate how findings can improve population health, address women's health through a biopsychosocial lens, and connect research to broader policy and practice impacts at local, national, and global levels. These slides will be available to everyone afterwards, so you can refer back to this list when you're preparing your own submissions. Now, moving on to navigating the publishing process, what journals to pick, and things to look out for when choosing the right home for your work. Choosing the right journal is a crucial step in the publishing process. Submitting to a well-matched journal improves your chances of acceptance and ensures your research reaches the right audience. To make an informed decision, consider the following factors. Reputation and editorial board. What's the journal's reputation in your field? Who are the editors and the board members? Are they well cited and diverse? Speaking with colleagues who have published in the journal can provide valuable insight. Paper type. Does the journal accept the type of manuscript you're submitting? Whether it's empirical research, a review, a case report, or a commentary, checking the journal's accepted formats early can prevent misalignment. Aims and scope. Does your research align with the journal's focus? Reviewing recent publications can help you to determine if your paper is a good fit. Keep an eye out for special collections, which may offer opportunities to publish within themed issues relevant to your research. Authors and reference list. Looking at where similar research has been published can guide your decision. If your reference list includes many articles from a certain journal, that could be a strong candidate for you. Acceptance rate and peer review. What is the journal's rejection rate? What is its peer review process? Is it single, double anonymized, or open? These are all things to consider for you. Readership and impact. Who will read your work? Is the journal open access or subscription based? Where is it indexed? For example, is the index in Scopus, PubMed, Medline? Key metrics like impact factor and citation rates can indicate the journal's reach and influence. Funding and institutional restrictions. Some funders or institutions require publication in indexed journals or those with specific licenses. Check whether your journal offers an open access option if needed. And finally, Sage Path. If your paper isn't the right fit for one journal, or if you're just struggling to find out which journal to go for, at Sage we have an author service called Sage Path, which can help you find an appropriate home for your work. And now moving on to women's research at Sage. At Sage, we're proud to host journals that focus on women-centric research. These are only just a few examples in our Gold Open Access portfolio: Therapeutic Advances in Reproductive Health, Women's Health, which is what Bushra and I work on, Journal of Endometriosis and Pelvic Pain Disorders, and Breast Cancer, Basic and Clinical Research. And here are some examples of special collections that we're working on in our open access portfolio. We regularly launch special collections across various fields, and many of these focus on research about women, their health, and their experience. Here are a few examples. In 2024, to celebrate International Women's Day, we launched women's research collections across the Therapeutic Advances Journal series. To highlight and uplift women in research, submissions required a female first, last, or corresponding author. These collections provided a platform to showcase the contributions of women researchers in various clinical fields. And geography-based collections. Some collections focus on regional issues, such as our joint collection on reproductive health across Africa, co-hosted by Therapeutic Advances in Reproductive Health and Women's Health. These collaborations bring attention to health challenges specific to different regions. I'll now hand over to Bushra, who will go through some of our DEI initiatives at Sage.
Thanks, Shasha. So given how we've spoken about the challenges women face in publishing, I just want to quickly go over the importance of incorporating DEI in the journal management and how we here at Sage approach this. So I'll give you next slide, please. Yeah, thank you. I'll give you an example from Women's Health, although many other Sage journals have incorporated this as well. So we have a DEI ambassador on the board. We ensure editorial boards are both diverse in gender and geographical representation. We have a section on the editorial board for early career researchers, which we call editorial review boards, and this provides the benefit of having your name recognized as part of the journal. It gives you benefits of having access to the research that's currently going on, and you also over time get some benefits from reviewing papers, and you build your relationship with the journal editorial board and editors, giving you more opportunities to get involved in research, special collections, and publishing in general. So at Women's Health, we have ensured that the editorial board is very diverse. We have 2 female editors in chief and 1 male, all from different therapy areas and locations. There are also processes in place to ensure people from lower and middle income countries can publish for free or at a lower rate using the Research for Life program. And yeah, that's kind of how we incorporate DEI in general at Sage. So I will hand over to Merit Beck for success stories.
Thank you. So I'm going to talk to you all a little bit about some of my experiences working with the Journal of Women's Health. So I am a guest editor and editorial board member of Women's Health. I just recently finished, although there are still some articles coming in, a special collection about improving menstrual health throughout the reproductive life course. We've published 26 articles. And I am also somebody who has hosted one of the first webinars that highlighted some of the publications included in that special collection. So it was an opportunity again for me to share my research, as well as call in other women who are conducting research on menstruation to, again, create community and collaboration to foster questions and perhaps even research partnerships. So I think that's also another really great way to get involved in the publishing process and to share your research and in things that are related to academic publishing. And one of the many multiverse of ways that Sage is doing really great work to get research out there, not just in the print format, but in creating spaces for the authors that they work with. So I think one of the other things to think about is that when you publish, obviously the journal matters, impact factor matters as well, but there are also journals that are doing a lot of work to help keep people engaged. So there's not only the Cassini webinar, but there's also this webinar that I've been involved in through my work with Sage. So again, it creates then more opportunities for you to get involved and to share these things, and that academic publishing doesn't have to look like just publishing in a journal. There are so many different avenues and so many different wonderful ways that we can harness social media and video conferencing and things like that to get all of our work out there. So I one of the things I think is the most exciting about my work with women's health is that I am able to submit my research, and then I do get an APC waiver as part of the agreement I have with being on the board. So I think with one, that's a way to get involved, obviously get your research out there, but it's also for a way for you to be more intimately involved in the work of journals on the back side of things, which also helps you then understand the submission process and how to navigate that more smoothly, more directly, in a shorter time frame. I have to say that working on the back end of a journal now, I understand why things like formatting are so important, why missing the IRB statement or the consent statement does delay things and causes then resubmission. So again, it's taught me to appreciate publishing from the other side. And then it also allows me, if I am working with students or fellow researchers, to sometimes then transfer my APC waiver to one of them. So again, it's a way that I can not only support myself, but support other women, other early career researchers, other students, to help them get their research out there. And being a guest editor then helps you build your own network. It increases your visibility. It leads to partnerships. I've met so many wonderful people and so many wonderful researchers and gotten more intimately involved in menstrual health research with global menstrual health researchers. It's also led to interesting partnerships that I would not have otherwise had, where we've launched surveys and we're now co-writing and hope to co-publish together. Again, partnership and co-publishing is also a way to help reduce the burden of the costs for publishing and just to kind of share the load, because again, now is my role as an author. I understand that the submission process for journals is one of my least favorite things to do. So when I have people that I can share that with and have them maybe every other time I'm the one that has to manage the submission, it is something that also helps. I think it's also really important to be open to other publishing avenues like op-eds, commentaries, think pieces on popular media, other ways to get your messages out there. I sometimes do museum talks on menstruation. Some of the universities that I'm affiliated with host podcasts and things like that, where I can also talk about my research. So it's really, I think, an important process. And if possible, if you are in an academic setting, consider working with press offices or communication specialists to put out press releases about your research. There's short little things that can be written, or you can write them and you release them to the press. And then if a journalist is looking for a topic to write on or is writing on a topic, you then have got your name out there, you've gotten your research out there, they can find you, they can connect with you, and then you can provide additional comment on whatever the story is and include little tiny tidbits from your research. So again, it's about how you can grow your name and how you can think about just different avenues for partnership. And now I really truly believe in the next slide, because I think this is the end of my slides. I think now I do actually this time pass it on to Laura, and I'm so sorry about my mistake earlier.
No worries. Hi, everyone. So I want to talk a little bit about post-publication public engagement. I work for an organisation that basically shares academic work with the general public by getting academics to collaborate with journalists like myself. So what I want to share with you is some observations over the years in trying to get women's voices out of academia and into the world. The first thing I want to tell you is good news, in that organisations such as mine, newspapers, media organisations, podcasters, they want to hear from you. We're way past a period of time where you need to convince organisations that a diversity of voices is good for them and good for the culture. We know this, and we are mostly in active pursuit of trying to diversify our contributions. So it's a seller's market effectively, and you're in a position of power. And what that means in practice, as far as I'm concerned, is that you should feel much more open than I think a lot of people realize about what your constraints are and what your pressures are, particularly when it comes to family obligations and the kinds of obligations that many women experience when they're trying to balance work and home life. A lot of my women contributors just tell me that I can do a bit of work now, and then I've got to take the kids to school, and then I've got to do a bit of work later. And the more that we can be open about that, the better the collaboration is. This is not going to be received as you making excuses or moaning. This is the world in which we live now. And most of the people you'll work with probably have similar experiences to you. It's about setting the parameters of a fruitful collaboration. The other thing that I've really noticed is that there's a real gender imbalance when it comes to academic regulars. So you see the same old faces over and over again on TV shows, on radio shows, on podcasts, and they're so often men. Women perhaps do a bit of work and then disappear. And I'd really encourage you to try and think about how to become a regular contributor to the public space when it comes to sharing your research. The easiest way to do that is to simply ask any PR people or media people that you're collaborating with, what are you looking for in your regulars? What can I do to become one of your regulars? So for me, I'm often looking for people who can write quickly on topics, who can bring evidence to the public conversation on topics, but I'm not looking for people who can write well. I'm here to help with that. Other people are looking for sort of short, sharp contributions from people. Others are kind of working around very fixed events like elections or national budgets. Think about how you can bring your research into that conversation and ask them what they're looking for. When it comes to public engagement, success breeds success. So the more you do it, the better you get at it, and the more your name is flying out there, and we can find you and turn you into someone who shares their work with the general public. Something that I really also think is incredibly important is, and I'm often telling people that I work with this, broaden your conception of what you're an expert in. When I ask male contributors what you're an expert in, they're an expert in absolutely everything. And I ask women that I work with, and they really only want to focus on the specific topic of their last paper. I'm not suggesting that you overinflate your CVs, but what I am saying is that you can potentially be kinder and more generous to yourself when it comes to defining what you're actually able to talk about to the general public. But that also means being realistic about what public engagement is and what it isn't. Public engagement is not advertising. So you need to be prepared to meet the world where the world is at, and share your work when it's the right time to do so, and share the parts of your work that the world is most interested in hearing about. That's not necessarily when your latest paper was out. I know that you publish your research and you want to tell the whole world about it immediately, but it might be that there's a better time and a better place to do it than that publication moment. So consider that when you're trying to share your work. So some practical tips in this respect is, again, to use your institution's comms teams and press officers. Every university, every think tank, every learned society, every research funder has a press office. And also on top of what Mary Beth was saying about press releases, they also have contact. So I'm in regular contact with press officers, and they know what I'm looking for and when I'm looking for it. And they're the perfect bridge for you to share your research at the right time with the right people. So use them as a resource. Also, become a listener and a reader before you become a contributor. If you do want to share your research with the world, you need to understand the tone that various outlets are taking, the kinds of work that they're interested in publicizing, and the kind of stuff that they're not interested in publicizing, and being realistic about that. It's very clear to me when people approach me to tell me about their research and they haven't read our website and they've misunderstood what we're trying to do. And that really puts me off wanting to work with them. So always read a website or listen to a radio show or a podcast before you attempt to become a contributor. They'll be much more interested in hearing about your research if you're able to show them how it fits into their work. But in that sense, you can also feel comfortable about being clear about what your boundaries are. You should absolutely say if there's a topic that you don't want to get into. It's actually just much easier for everyone involved if you're clear on these things from the get-go. And we do want to hear what you're not willing to talk about as much as what you're willing to talk about. I think that's particularly important when we're talking about research by and about women. But also cold call people because your male colleagues are doing so. I hear from people I don't know every single day with ideas about interesting research that they're working on. And to be honest with you, most of them are men, and I'd love to hear from more women. So don't be afraid to just reach out and just propose something to somebody you don't know. We're completely used to it. And the worst thing that can happen is that we'll say no, or we might ignore you, but that's, you know, you can live with that. And with that in mind as well, the being rejected is not a rejection forever. I reject people on a daily basis as well, and it's rarely got anything to do with the kinds of work people are doing, and it's never anything personal. It's almost always about what I have capacity to work on, and you should feel free to promote your work over and over again until it sticks. Again, male colleagues are doing so, so don't be put off by one rejection. Keep trying until you find the space that works for you. And with that in mind, the biggest message I can give you when it comes to sharing research is that timing is everything. So as I said, it's not just about when you've got a piece of work out, it's about when the world is ready to hear about your work. So is there a big consultation happening that affects women that you can contact a policymaker to discuss? Is there a change in the law coming up? Is there something happening culturally? This, I think, is increasingly a really important way to share research, is to tap in what's going on in the outside world beyond policy making. So a really good concrete example from our work at the moment is we've been publishing research for many, many years that talks about children's treatment in when they're in police custody, and it's really important work, and a few people will pick up an article and be interested in it. And then about 2 weeks ago, this absolutely huge Netflix series came out called Adolescence, in which a child is held in police custody, and one of the people who has used us to advertise their work on children in custody reached out and said, let's do a piece now. And that's had tens of thousands of readers, all because she's understood what her timing is. So do just be aware of anything that's going on and keep your ear to the ground and just be clear about when your moment has arrived and grasp it. So I'm happy to expand on any of those topics in Q&A.
Thank you all to all our panelists for this enlightening presentation. Please, as a reminder to our audience, do submit any more questions you have into the Q&A box. I'm going to do a little bit more housekeeping before we get into the Q&A, so this is your time. We do want to hear from you. So before we get started, I'd just like to remind you all of our upcoming webinars. We've got one on April 9th about how to write a systematic review, April 29th, Mastering Psychology Research. So this is specifically for those who are studying psychology and researching in psychology. We've got one on data collection and analysis, converting dissertations or theses into a manuscript. Those is more for our early career researchers. And also in June, we've got another thematic webinar similar to this one about research that supports the queer community. So please have a look out. And if you're interested in joining us, visit the page linked here when you get the slides sent around to you at the end. Finally, should you have any questions or need support along your journey as an author, the Sage Author Gateway is Sage's dedicated space for author support and services. Visit the website for more resources, tips and tricks while writing, support through the production process, and help in publicising your article after it's been published. Information about our author rights and reuse policy is easily findable for reference. And last but not least, we also have a Chinese Author Gateway that features translated materials on these topics. Sage takes its role as a partner to authors throughout the publishing process very seriously. Hopefully this workshop has been helpful, but if you need any additional guidance or a refresher, we have many resources on the website. The Sage Campus platform offers a course on how to get published, and we also have a 3-part video series with some great tips and tricks that we've already covered today. Plus, we have a handy PDF guide that you can reference and easily share with your colleagues. Okay, thank you very much. We will be headed into our Q&A session now, which is very exciting. I'm going to start kind of right from the beginning. We had a lovely attendee ask Fasiha, I think is their name. I have a question about resilience. So, I'd just like to ask any of our panelists, can you share a story of resilience when it came to facing challenges around the publication process? Putting you on the spot immediately.
Yeah, I'm happy to answer that.
Perfect.
I think one of the things that you have to be prepared for when you're publishing is there is a lot of rejection that is going to happen. Almost every article that you write is going to have feedback and like maybe not like an initial rejection, but it's going to have a revise and resubmit. So it's built into the process. And like Laura mentioned, a no isn't a no forever. It's sometimes a not quite yet, and you need some revision. And I think the other thing, and this is advice that I had gotten from a mentor of mine earlier in my career, is that every article has a home. It's just up to you to be patient and resilient and to find that journal that will be that paper's home. So I have I have articles that I've waited 18 months for a decision on, and then it was a rejection, which was heartbreaking, especially because then the data was getting old. And then the next journal that I went to with that article was an acceptance. And I mean, after a revision process, but it did take a moment. And I think, one of the things I've learned from that is to be more proactive and follow up with journals, especially if it's taking a long time. I mean, not like a week or two, but 18 months is outside the norm, I think, for hearing back on an initial submission. So there's that. And I have an article right now that I've written looking at sexuality messages in music, and then looking specifically at the production and the writing team and how many of those songs are written and performed and produced by women. And that article has gone to 5 different journals, and it's been rejected because either they've published something just recently that's somewhat similar, or the scope doesn't quite fit, although I thought it did. And so it's like one of those things where at any moment I could have orphaned that article and just said, well, that piece is like, I'm not gonna think about this anymore. 5, 6 rejections, that's too many. And sometimes I'll put it aside for a couple of weeks and then I'll come back and dust it off. So I think, there's also like giving yourself some time to maybe not grieve, but, be willing and ready to kind of go through that process, because it does require resilience. And I'm confident that one day I too will get that paper published, because as of yet, I've never had a manuscript that I've written not be published. It sometimes comes with a lot of rejection and a lot of resubmission and a lot of submission to different journals after you've gotten that rejection. But yeah, I mean, it takes time, but if you keep at it, I truly and firmly believe that almost every single manuscript has a home if it's well written and, scientifically sound or ethically sound, or if you're in the humanities, that there is that underlying theory and it's well constructed and the arguments are good.
Yeah, that's a great answer. I think sometimes it just takes a few tries to get something through. Does any of our other panelists like to add on this, or can we shuffle along to the next question? Okay, great. We've got a question here from Hazel. And they say, do you have any advice specifically for researchers publishing in humanities or social sciences? We've had a couple of questions along this line. Mary Beck, I guess this is one for you.
Yeah, so I think one of the things to look at is, even if it's a more STEM related journal like Women's Health, when we were working on the special collection for menstruation, we made sure that we were including that broadly. So we included research by people who were looking at criminality studies and menstruation experiences in prison. So there was absolutely no numeric or scientific data in that. It was all based on interviews and things like that. So definitely more social science focused. So even if a journal has or is primarily more STEM related, take a look back at some of the other titles. It's possible that it's a more flexible journal that's looking for more broad interpretation of what it means to be doing menstrual health research or research around women's health. And then what I will say about some of the other non-SAGE, non-women's health specific writing that I've done that goes out to humanities journals is there's any number again, of journals in the humanities and things like that. I do find that it takes a bit longer to get those things published, just because the cycle for the data is longer, right? It gets more evergreen if you're talking about human stories and in-depth interviews and things like that, as opposed to more quantitative research where those numbers get old and they get old fast. So it just takes a little bit longer. I think also humanities-based people tend to just respond a little bit slower. I think it's sort of the nature of that research. But I think that the process is very much the same. The writing the article, the submitting it, the revision process, all of that. And again, I think that there's actually, I think, so many more journals that are humanities focused. It's just a matter of finding the right one and finding a good fit. And I think that is a bit trickier. And the other thing I forgot to say about timeline for humanities journals is that I often find they are also published less frequently. So there are some journals in the humanities that are published once a year, or they have 2 editions a year, or maybe it's only quarterly. So again, that slows down the process and also might make it a little bit harder for you to get your article published in those journals if they're only publishing for editions for journal for, oh my gosh, I lost the word, not editions.
Volumes.
Yeah, thank you, for volumes. Sorry, it's been a really long day. I'm an American,
You're
so
doing great.
there's so many things happening that are going through my mind. If they're only publishing 4 times a year, it's just that timeline is going to slow down a bit more than if it's a journal that publishes a volume every single month.
Great, that's an amazing answer. We've actually got another question from Hazel. Thank you, Hazel. This one I think I'm going to hand to Bushra. It's how do editors consider equity when assessing journal submissions? So is it something that factors into your mind when you're receiving an article from a particular type of person?
Yeah, definitely. So very often we monitor our where submissions come from on a regular basis based on geographical coverage or gender, just to make sure that we're not underrepresenting a certain demographic. And if a certain demographic is underrepresented, we would run a special collection to cover this potential gap, or we would directly commission from these authors. Our editorial board being so diverse, hopefully can mitigate some biases that can happen in submissions. Often the scope checking is not done by one person, it's done by multiple people from very different backgrounds. So we're hoping this diversity really does help. Again, our Research for Life programs hopefully helps with that by providing waivers or reducing the fees. And yeah, hopefully we can reach broader audiences with that. And then finally, we do provide language editing services for people who don't who can't get the English perfect. And then we also, on a case-by-case basis, can waive this fee. And yeah, it's small things here and there that we try to do.
Yeah, that's great. And obviously, during the presentation, we talked a lot about these efforts as well to try and keep equity at the forefront of all of our publishing. I've got another question here from Flick. Does Sage accept trans inclusive perspectives on the women's health papers? I think this is one we're going to give to Shasha.
Short answer, 100% yes. Again, this is something that is dependent on each journal's specific aims and scopes. But speaking for the Women's Health Journal specifically, we are absolutely committed to publishing multidisciplinary research that spans the whole spectrum of women's health. We acknowledge that women's health research is needed by more than just cisgender women, and appreciate that trans men and women are often left out of women's health conversations, and non-binary, genderqueer, and gender non-conforming individuals also have specific health needs that need to be explored. So yes, these are very much accepted.
Great answer. Okay. I've got a question here from Isabel. And I'm going to throw this out there to both to everyone in the panel. What about getting published when you're no longer in academia? Can you still conduct research if you're working independently? And what are some strategies that you can use to make this process easier?
I can kickstart this again. Just talking from a editor's perspective, you can definitely still conduct research. We regularly get submissions from people who are outside of the academic sector. For example, if you work within a different industry, like the pharmaceutical sector as a consultant. Sorry, that is very STEM-based, but all of my journals are STEM, so I don't know too much about the humanities side, but that's just one example. But some journals at Sage, for example, all of the therapeutic advances journals, including Women's Health, have an article type called Patient Perspective, for example. This is just one thing that you could do. These articles have a minimum of one patient author, or they can be written by a patient organization, and this allows patients to present their perspective on a topic and incorporate their own experience into a field. We've published a few of these on Women's Health recently, and that's just one example. There are also other article types, such as reviews, where you don't need to necessarily be in academia to conduct, as they rely on assessing previously published data, and editorials, where you can write a short opinion-based article to provide your perspective on a key issue that is relevant to the journal.
And just to add, I work with a lot of first-time authors as well. And so the thing about writing and publishing is that goes under an anonymous peer review. So you don't need to have any specific degree after your name. I've had students who are in their undergrad and have no qualifications, no academic qualifications, that have gotten work published because they have access to data or secondary data analysis, which is also another way for people who are no longer in academia to still be publishing and publishing on relevant data from these publicly available sources. I also myself am in a position where my research is often conducted in partnership with corporations if they are looking to do something in a sort of vaguely women's health or sexual health space. I can't speak much about it because there are NDAs and things like that, but we're absolutely going to be looking at publishing moving forward. And as long as the research is done and there's an ethics board that's reviewed it, so an institutional review board or an independent IRB or ethics review board, that data is still data that is being collected. So it doesn't matter if you're affiliated with a university or not. Anybody can publish. It's about the quality of the ideas and making sure that that data is collected ethically.
These are some great points. Thank you, Shasha and Mary Beck. I've got one for Laura here. What is the best way to initially approach PR and media companies or connections? Is there anything that you should 100% avoid?
Yep. So the best thing to do is to identify which journalist, which reporter, which editor at any given publication shares your interests. And you can do that by seeing what they're putting out on social media or by looking back on the website about the kinds of articles they've been publishing. Because what we tend to do is get into a groove of the theme that we're interested in. So find the person that is doing the kind of work that you are, that is most similar to yours, and simply email them. And when you do that, start with the real world as your basis. So have you seen that RFK Jr. has done XYZ in the field of health? I have evidence to show you that this affects women in this way. And that will spark their interest in getting in touch with you and potentially beginning a collaboration. So try to avoid just emailing someone saying, I've got a new paper out. It's really interesting. Do what you can to show the journalist that now is the time for them to talk to you, that now is the time for you to enter the public discourse about a given topic on a given day. I'd also say just be very just before you just send someone an email out of the blue, just do a quick sweep of what's going on in the world and make sure that you're not emailing them on a day when they're very clearly going to be busy with something else. It happens to me all the time. I had that day when President Trump was being absolutely atrocious to Vladimir Zelensky in the Oval Office. Someone emailed me with a really interesting piece of work about bad language in sport. And I was like, I don't have the headspace for this today. Call me tomorrow. So that is just a bit of due diligence that you should always do. Just like, what else is going on in the world? And am I going to be competing with something that I simply can't compete with?
Yeah, that's an amazing bit of advice. I've got a question here that is there any specific, I'm throwing it out here, is there any specific organizations that can help with funding, especially given our political climate with DEI? This is a little sort of like a touchy subject. Has anyone encountered anything in the US or outside the US that can help with this kind of thing, particularly through the lens of equity? Okay,
Not yet,
not yet.
but I'm sure this is going to be something that moving forward. But maybe like nonprofits and things like that that have small budgets. And again, if I think maybe this is also something where you can appeal to an APC waiver reduction at journals and things like that. Again, it's always worth that question to be asked that was mentioned earlier. That maybe there is something that can be done, especially if you bring up that it is a DEI issue. But I think it's one of those things that we're seeing these changes happening so quickly in the US that we just haven't had time for that reaction yet. There's so many fires to put out.
Mm.
This is not one that's been addressed yet.
Hmm. Yeah, we'll keep an eye out, and there'll probably be information somewhere that would be useful, and we'll make sure to disperse it. I've got a very specific one for Laura. It says, when you reach out to someone like you, how formulated does the piece have to be, and what sort of turnaround times are there from contact to publication?
Good question. So I'd actually say the less formulated, the better. I would actually, I always advise people don't write a full piece of work before you get in contact with me, because I will always have my own feedback about what we need to do to a piece of work to make it work for my audience and to maximize your visibility. And I find that when people have already written a piece, it becomes harder to get them to think about the work flexibly. And the same goes for a lot of publications, really. So I would say keep it quite rough in the first instance, or at the very least, if you are someone that feels the need to kind of really prepare and have something ready to sell, be prepared to be flexible about about changes, to respond to what the journalist you're working with knows about their audience. And in terms of turnaround time, generally levels that you guys are probably a little uncomfortable with. We are talking days and weeks rather than months and years. But you'll find that most people, again, going back to what I've been saying about being open about what your boundaries are and what your restrictions are, the more you can do that, the more flexibility you can build into your timelines. But yeah, we generally find that moving quite quickly is necessary to keep yourself in the public conversation and to maximize your readership.
Yeah, that's great. It's crazy to see the difference between the sort of like PR like media world and the way academia works. So I guess the trick is being able to manage both sides. I've got a I've got a question here about any tips from women who are coming from lower income countries, or what we might call the global south. There's many different words for this. Bushra, you mentioned a bit about the Research for Life program, but I'm going to throw this back in Shasha in your direction to give some tips for people who are looking to publish from those areas.
Yeah, again, just echoing the Research for Life program is a really good thing that SAGE does at the moment. There are two groups of countries. Group A get 100% waiver, Group B get a reduced waiver on APCs, but also just keep a lookout on special collections. We do have a lot of geographic-based collections going around, such as we had one on research in Africa specifically for women's health. So just keeping an eye out for these thematic things would be my advice, really.
Anything to add, Bushra? Otherwise, I think we're gonna wrap it up very soon. That was, I think, a good one to end on, unless you have anything to add.
Nothing to add. I think, yeah, just a reminder that you can ask for a waiver for the language editing service. I know that has been very helpful for so many authors. But otherwise, I think we're all covered. Thanks, Georgina.
Well, amazing. Thank you very much for our panelists for your incredibly insightful responses and your presentation earlier. Thank you to everyone for joining. This has been a real joy to see the community come together and to be helping people along their researching and their publishing journey. Just another brief reminder, there are loads more of these webinars that you can sign up for and that have already been recorded are on YouTube. So if you need any help with your publishing journey, whether you're in women's studies or not, please do have a look at our resources. Thank you, Laura, Mary Beck, Bushra, and Shasha. And we'll hope to see everyone around very soon.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.